We have a fantastic program today, and we have all of you. So what could be better? Nice, Zubin. Okay, everyone. So yeah, if you're just joining us, please share where you're calling in from and something great or lovely or something small you noticed that was positive over the past weekend. And it's been so nice reading your responses. Folks are just joining the call. Hello in Ohio. If you have a question also, you can use the chat button. But we are going to get started right now. It's 12:01 and we should not wait for the dose of togetherness to begin. So with that in mind, welcome everybody to Monday's dose of togetherness. In the face of isolation, of illness, the anxiety, the death that we're encountering across the world, it's really important to have a space to be together in community. My name is Brad Wolf, and I'm the executive director and founder of Reimagine. As a nonprofit organization, we spark community experiences like this one that empower individuals, families, and communities to face the hardest parts of our existence, namely illness and death and caregiving and grief, but while always working to inspire people to celebrate life and one another. And on behalf of the entire Reimagine team and on behalf of our incredible partners who spark these experiences with us, the Greater Good Science Center, it's my pleasure to welcome you all to the Monday edition of the Dose of Togetherness. It's great to start the week this way with all of you. So with that in mind, once again, here is my lovely colleague, Dara, showing us how to use Zoom. As most of you have already discovered, there is a chat button on the bottom on a desktop where you can send messages to be shared with everyone or just to the Reimagine team. And if you want to close that chat box, if you find it distracting, there is a button there that you can push close, which some people like to do during the meditation in particular. You've already been testing this out by sharing where you're calling in from and something great that happened this past weekend. Note at the bottom that you can also mute or unmute your audio, but right now it's muted. When we send you into breakouts, and we'll talk about that in a bit, you have the opportunity to unmute yourself, and please make sure you do that. Otherwise, no one's going to hear you then. Also, yes, there are breakout sessions, so keep that in mind. One of the highlights of these calls, for those of you who haven't participated yet, is connecting with people from across the world who are experiencing some of the same things, different things, but just a chance to meet people and connect and really feel that sense of humanity that otherwise we don't get when we're in our own bubbles. So we totally invite you to participate in that at the end. And let's see, if your video connection is somehow not buffering, stop your video or you can use the phone number to call in with. And to unmute your phone, if you're in a breakout, you can press *6. So with that in mind, I'm very excited. As you know, there's really 4 elements that we walk people through during this session together. And we always begin with a sense of grounding. And we're delighted to have back our colleague, Margaret, who led the most fantastic meditation a couple weeks ago. And she's here again to lead one with all of us today. So I give it to Miss Margaret.
Hi all, welcome. And going to guide us through a meditation to cultivate gentleness in our thoughts, in our minds, and our actions. So if you can uncross your legs or ankles and bring your feet firmly to the earth, allowing your eyes to gently close, placing one hand on your belly and one hand on your heart. Just inviting your jaw to relax, your neck to relax, and your shoulders to relax. Anywhere that you're holding unnecessary tension, dropping it to the earth. Guiding your awareness to your breath, feeling your belly expand on the inhalation and contract on the exhalation. And as you drop more deeply into the present moment, become aware of any racing thoughts. When our mind is overly active, it's hard to have a sense of gentleness in our thoughts. So as thoughts arise, offering them your loving awareness and then allowing them to fall gracefully to the earth. Moving from thinking mind to gentle mind. Using your breath as your anchor and your guide. With each inhalation and exhalation, allowing thoughts to fall to the earth, returning to gentle mind. And as you arrive in gentle mind, allowing the sweet essence of gentle compassion to radiate through the palms of your hand and infuse your body. Churning this sweet nectar of gentleness within yourself so that you may move forth into the world with gentle actions and gentle words. Noticing how easy it is to be gentle with yourself when you drop into this stillness, in this opportunity of social distancing and isolation is an opportunity of spaciousness, an opportunity of slowing down, of reprieve from the busyness and the doing, so that you may cultivate more gentleness within yourself and within your surroundings. Continuing to relax your thoughts with ease and grace to return to the stillness of this present moment, a moment that is filled with spaciousness and gentleness. Keeping your eyes closed, bringing your palms together at the center of your heart. Begin rubbing your hands to create heat. And as you're creating this heat, infuse within the palms of your hands this sense of gentleness that you've cultivated within. And as your eyes remain closed, opening your palms and allowing this sweet gentleness to move into the space around you, to guide your actions and your words for the remainder of the day, for the week. Slowly opening your eyes, returning to the space, and resting your palms on your lap. Thank you.
Thank you, Margaret. That was so nice. You always help us kick off the week so well. Thank you. And with that, we're going to move on to the next phase of our time together. After grounding, we always move to inspiration, and what at UC Berkeley they call moral elevation, a period to you know, lift us up, which is an important thing to do in times like this. And we have someone very special with us today to help us do that. Michael Hebb, who is a partner at an organization called Round Glass and the founder of EOL Collective. You might know him from Death Over Dinner, or Drugs Over Dinner, earthtodinner.org, Women Teach Men, The Living Wake. For the past really 20 years, Michael has been working so hard to understand the secrets of human connection, and which is obviously what we're doing here together today. And his second book, Let's Talk About Death, is something you should all check out and purchase. It just gives so much wisdom around subjects pertinent to this time together now. And with that, we'd love to turn it over to Michael for today's inspiration.
Thank you, Brad. Can you hear me just fine? Great. Well, it's an honor to be here and be among the Reimagined community. It's meant so much to me for so long. As a way to begin, I want to actually share a couple pieces of writing that I read this week that did such a better job of summing up so many things that I've been thinking and feeling than I could possibly do with such a few number of words. So the first is from Elizabeth Renzetti, and she wrote, I'm not going to suggest this crisis has a silver lining, not when medical workers and shop staff and home care assistants are out there putting their lives on the line. And people with the virus are dying, afraid and alone. There is no silver lining. But there is a rare opportunity to see how behavior changes when it is challenged by a new and terrifying threat. It seems to me that we've quickly, but perhaps only temporarily, lost our appetite to strive for perfection. I find myself perversely heartened by the anti-Instagram world now on display. The messy bookshelves and Zoom calls, the misshapen sourdough loaves, misshapen sourdough loaves, the gray roots, the clueless spouses rounding around pantsless, the wonky pets. It makes you marvel at the energy we spent maintaining the illusion of perfection in the first place. I'm sure that resonates with a lot of us. And secondly, from Olga Tokarczuk, I can't say her name right, and I just totally destroyed it, but Polish writer. This was in the New Yorker, and she's a very short line, a couple of lines. My introversion, long strangled and abused by hyperactive extroverts, has brushed itself off and come out of the closet. The virus has reminded us, after all, the thing we have been denying so passionately, that we are delicate creatures, composed of the most fragile material, that we die, that we are mortal. So when this started, I got very quiet about the work that I do around death and around end of life. I didn't know the right way to move forward. And the reality is, and a lot of people who work in the end of life space will probably resonate with this. The reality is the majority of us have created projects and initiatives, bodies of work for a culture that denies death. Death Over Dinner was designed to wake people up. We kept death in the title as a very kind of strong but honest memento mori. We're no longer in a culture that is denying death. I wouldn't say we're in a culture that's embracing it, but we are in a culture that's facing it every day. And I didn't know at first how the work that I do around end-of-life conversations would work during this period of time. I didn't know if it translated what needed to be changed. So I had to think about it for a while, and I was reticent to even host a death dinner. Now I've been part of hosting 2 in the last week, virtual death dinners with over 50 people. And we've made some changes. And those changes are around gentleness. The dinner table is a gentle space in the first place, but without the warmth of the candlelight or necessarily the smell of shared food, the embraces when you see people you love, etc. It's a little bit hard to cultivate gentle connection via Zoom. I think Reimagine is doing a great job, and we're seeing some incredible use of it. But we were very curious, how do we change Death Over Dinner to respond to this moment? And one of the things that we did, which we never do, is we shared all of the questions that would be asked during the experience. Death Over Dinner is just an experience where people respond to a series of questions over a dinner table about their mortality. And instead of holding them back and kind of surprising people, having them come to this realization of these sometimes very striking questions, like, if you only had 30 days left to live, how would you feel? What would you do with the next 30 days? What would you do with your final day? Where are you? How are you feeling in your last hour? Who's around you? Instead of shocking somebody into a kind of awareness around these things, with these questions, we've decided to share those questions before the experience, because we want people to have a chance to think through this conversation. So many of us and so many of our loved ones are in fight or flight or freeze. And it's very, very important when we are deciding to have this conversation right now with our loved ones, because it is an important thing to know. It's more important than ever before, but that doesn't mean it's more accessible or it's easier than ever before. It's actually a more difficult time because we are so rattled and we aren't getting down into our belly, into our breath, and into our gentle, subtle body as often as would probably be very useful. So that would be my invitation for people as we're thinking about, how do we have these conversations right now in this moment in time? One of the things that we have going for us, and it's one of the only things, quite frankly, is that we face this collectively. It's the first time that so many of us have faced a threat, what they call in the psychological world as a death prime, but we faced a realization of our mortality so collectively, so universally. A lot of times this conversation around end-of-life plans, end-of-life wishes, making sure people have advanced care directives, making sure they have living wills. So much of this work and these conversations tend to be directional. They tend to be a should conversation. I need to, or I should have this conversation with my parents because they're getting older, or I'm seeing the first signs of what may be early onset Alzheimer's, or we should know these things. It's a very directional type of conversation, and it makes it more pressured in general. What we have right now is the opportunity to realize that we are all collectively facing this. And so a family getting prepared together doesn't seem like a crazy thing. It seems like a very rational and reasonable response to the situation that we're in. So that's one thing that we have that's going for us right now. And if you do want to have these conversations with your loved ones, I would say make it a group activity. Make it a group activity with friends. Make it a group activity with your family, with your spouse. Let's do it together. The other things that really always are the case when it comes to this conversation, I've found, is that it's much more powerful to treat it like a courtship, almost like when we're looking for love or when we're looking for a job. When we're looking for love or when we're looking for a job, we keep trying. We hear a no and we try again, we get more creative. You know, if we're courting somebody, we don't bring somebody who's allergic to roses a rose. It's just not what we do. We think about that person. We think about what they value most, what motivates them, what moves them, what delights them. Same thing when we're, you know, trying to get work. We think about the needs of the place that we're trying to be employed by and obtain a position at. And so that is very much the case still now. Like to really think about the person that you want to have the conversation with, and how can you, meet them where they're at, speak to what they value, and don't take a rejection as that they don't want to have the conversation, as maybe they don't want to have the conversation that way. And let's see, I have some notes here because it is COVID times, and we like to refer to notes. One of the other, I think, very important elements about having this conversation is, instead of placing the blame on my mother won't talk about this because she's so closed or because she's so afraid of death. I like to turn that around a little bit and say, play a game with myself, or with people, have people that I'm working with play a game with themselves that says, what in me needs to change so that my mother or my father or my spouse feels comfortable having the conversation with me, as opposed to this sort of blaming. And that knowing oneself, preparing oneself, taking on the responsibility around the conversation, it does become a more enjoyable adventure around stepping into how we can talk about these things. And then I wanted to think about how we can prepare ourselves in these times. And that's why we brought in ritual to this topic today. Both we're thinking about gentleness, and we're thinking about ritual. And why ritual? I'm turning to Joseph Campbell, as so many of us do so often. And Joseph Campbell has a lot to say about ritual. And here's one of my favorite quotes of his. A ritual is the enactment of a myth. And by participating in the ritual, you are participating in the myth. And since myth is a projection of the depth wisdom of the psyche, by participating in a ritual, participating in the myth, you are being, as it were, put in accord with that wisdom, which is the wisdom that is inherent within you anyhow. Your consciousness is being reminded of the wisdom of your own life. So how are we going to stay sane? How are we going to stay vital? How are we going to stay available? How are we going to stay gentle? How are we going to be able to have to create the container and have the wisdom to hold these conversations? And a lot of that can be really helped by rituals. And so, there's a lot of rituals happening right now. The vigil that Reimagine hosted the other night with Katie Butler and some other remarkable people. People singing songs from their balconies in unison, people making joyful noises. There's a huge growth in people that aren't used to creating altars in their home, creating altars in their home, and people who don't usually pray, praying. And these rituals are important for us to try out, even if they're awkward, even if they're new. And the more we work a ritual, the more it works on us. There was one thing I was reading, and before we close, because people are saying, well, that's nice, and altar's nice, or making a joyful noise is a nice idea, but what does it actually do? And anthropologist Dimitri Xgalatas was writing about two of his studies that are about to come out. And I quote, "In Mauritius, we saw that Hindus experienced lower anxiety after they performed temple rituals, which we measured using heart rate monitors. And in the US, we found that Jewish students who attended more group rituals had lower levels of the stress hormone cortisol." So in a sense, these two things work hand in hand. The idea of how we lower our cortisol, prepare ourselves, remind ourselves of the wisdom that's inherent in us, and then remind ourselves about we are collectively in this together. And so we can have these conversations from that standpoint with loved ones that may otherwise have been inaccessible. And then to be gentle with yourself. The ritual is a great way of reinforcing gentleness with self and self-care. And then to be gentle with your loved ones and treat it like a courtship when it comes to this conversation or any of the other difficult conversations we may face. I think with that, we're moving on to groups.
Thank you, Michael, so much.